Princess Lyra stood before the massive window of Harmony Prime Station and watched the stars. Behind her, diplomats from two civilizations argued about the final details of the treaty. Her people, the Valexians, had been at war with humanity for 2 long years. Thousands had died on both sides. Now, finally, there was a chance for peace. But peace came with a price. "Princess, they are ready for you," her assistant said softly. Lyra turned away from the stars. She wore the traditional blue robes of her house, decorated with silver threads that represented her royal bloodline. Today, those robes felt heavy. Today, she would marry a human she had never met. The council chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Valexians sat on one side, their tall frames and pale skin marking them clearly. Humans sat on the other side, smaller and more diverse in appearance. Between them was a space, a gap that represented 2 years of violence and mistrust. Lyra walked into that gap. Ambassador Nicole Wright, the chief human diplomat, stood waiting. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back tightly. "Princess Lyra," she said, bowing slightly, "thank you for your courage." "This is my duty," Lyra replied in careful English. She had spent weeks learning the language. "Nevertheless, it takes courage." Nicole gestured to a man standing nearby. "May I introduce Lieutenant Jake Morrison?" Lyra turned to look at her future husband. Jake Morrison was not what she expected. The Valexian propaganda had shown humans as monsters, brutal and savage. But Jake looked ordinary. He was of average height for a human, with brown hair cut short in military style. His eyes were hazel, and they watched her with obvious nervousness. He wore a formal uniform, dark blue with silver buttons. "Princess," Jake said, attempting a Valexian greeting. His pronunciation was clumsy but sincere. "Lieutenant," she replied. They stood there for a moment, two strangers about to bind their lives together for politics. High Chancellor Vex Nor, the head of the Valexian Military Council, approached them. He was old and stern, his face lined with disapproval. "Let us proceed," he said coldly. "The sooner this is done, the better." The ceremony was a blend of both cultures. A Valexian priest sang the traditional bonding hymn, while a human chaplain read verses about unity and hope. Lyra and Jake stood side by side, not touching, as words in 2 languages washed over them. When it was time to exchange vows, Jake turned to face her fully. Up close, she could see a small scar on his left cheek. A war wound, probably. "I, Jake Morrison, promise to honor this union," he said in English, then repeated it in halting Valexian. "I will work for peace between our people." Lyra's turn came. "I, Lyra Velsheri, accept this bond. I will bridge our 2 civilizations with understanding and respect." The priest handed them each a crystal, blue for Valexia and white for Earth. They were supposed to hold them together, symbolizing unity. Jake's hand was warm when it touched hers. His grip was gentle, careful, as if he was afraid of hurting her. The crystals glowed where their hands met. "It is done," the priest announced. "Two become one in purpose." The chamber erupted in polite applause. Some of it sounded genuine. Most of it sounded like people clapping because they were supposed to. Lyra looked at Jake. He looked back at her. They were married now, bound together by treaty and tradition. But they were still strangers. The reception afterward was awkward. Lyra and Jake sat at the head table, surrounded by politicians and military officers who watched their every move. They made small talk, stilted and formal. "How was your journey to the station?" Lyra asked. "Long," Jake replied, "but uneventful. And yours?" "The same." Silence fell between them again. A human woman approached their table. She had dark skin and wore a Navy captain's uniform. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said warmly. Congratulations. Thank you, Captain Cruz, Jake said, and Lyra heard real affection in his voice. This was someone he knew, someone he trusted. Captain Helen Cruz turned to Lyra. Princess, I hope you'll both be happy. Jake is a good man. You know him well? Lyra asked. We served together before the war started. He was my best pilot. Helen smiled. And he has a good heart, even if he doesn't show it easily. After Helen left, Lyra studied Jake with new curiosity. You were a pilot? Yes, fighter craft, mostly reconnaissance missions. He paused. Before things got bad. You fought in the war? Yes. His voice became quieter. I did what I had to do. Lyra wanted to ask more, but Chancellor Vexnor appeared beside their table. Princess, a word. She excused herself and followed the Chancellor to a quiet corner. His expression was harsh. You have done your duty, he said, but do not forget that these humans are dangerous. They fight like animals. This marriage changes nothing about their nature. The war is over, Chancellor, Lyra said firmly. We must move forward. The war is paused, Vexnor corrected, and it will resume when these savages show their true colors. He walked away before she could respond. Lyra returned to Jake, troubled by the Chancellor's words. She found her new husband standing by the window, looking out at the stars, just as she had done earlier. Are you all right? She asked. Jake glanced at her. Just thinking. This is strange for both of us, isn't it? Very strange, Lyra admitted. I know you didn't choose this, Jake said quietly. Neither did I. But I meant what I said in my vows. I'll do my best to make this work, to honor you and work for peace. There was something sincere in his voice that touched Lyra. Perhaps this human was not what she had been taught to expect. I will try as well, she said. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there were their two homeworlds, separated by distance and years of hatred. Between them stood a princess and a pilot, strangers bound by hope that their union might mean something more than politics. The celebration continued around them, but in that moment, it was just the two of them. The first day of their new life together had begun. 6 weeks had passed since the wedding. Lyra sat in the shared quarters aboard the research vessel Concordia, studying a datapad filled with human history. The more she read, the more confused she became. Humans were contradictions. They created beautiful art and terrible weapons. They wrote poetry about peace while perfecting the science of war. They valued life intensely, yet threw themselves into battle without hesitation. The door opened, and Jake entered, his shirt damp with sweat. He had been in the gym again, maintaining the rigorous training schedule he followed every day. Still reading? He asked, grabbing a towel. I am trying to understand your people, Lyra said, but every answer leads to more questions. Jake sat down across from her. Over the past weeks, they had fallen into an easy routine. They shared quarters but gave each other space. They ate meals together and talked about safe topics. It was comfortable but distant, like roommates rather than married partners. What confuses you today? Jake asked. Lyra showed him the datapad. This war, the one you call the Second World War. Humans killed millions of each other. But then after it ended, former enemies became friends. How is that possible? Jake was quiet for a moment. Humans have short memories for hate, he finally said. We remember the dead, but we don't want our children to keep dying. So we forgive. We move forward. Valexians do not forget, Lyra said. We remember every slight, every injustice. We pass down grudges through generations. That sounds exhausting. Despite herself, Lyra smiled. It is. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the ship's intercom. All personnel to the observation deck. We're approaching the nebula of 7 colors. Jake stood and offered his hand to Lyra. Come on, you have to see this. The observation deck was crowded with humans and Valexians, all facing the massive windows. Outside, space itself seemed to be painted. Clouds of gas in brilliant colors, red, orange, blue, green, violet, swirled in cosmic currents. Stars glittered within the colors like diamonds scattered on silk. Lyra gasped. It's beautiful. My mother brought me here when I was 10, Jake said softly. She was a merchant captain. This was her favorite place in the galaxy. It was the first time Jake had mentioned his family. Lyra knew from the records that he had lost his parents in the early days of the war, a Valexian raid on a civilian station. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Jake didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the nebula. They died quickly. That's what they told me. I don't know if it's true, but I choose to believe it. You must hate us. My people killed them. Finally, Jake turned to face her. His eyes were sad, but not angry. I did hate for a while. I hated so much it burned inside me. But hate just makes you empty. My mother wouldn't have wanted that for me. Lyra felt something shift inside her chest. This human had every reason to despise her, yet he had treated her with nothing but respect and patience. You are not what I expected, she said. Neither are you, Jake replied. Over the following days, something changed between them. The careful distance began to close. They talked more, about deeper things. Jake told her about growing up on colony ships, always moving, always seeing new things. Lyra told him about the rigid structure of Valexian society, where every person had their place determined by birth. One evening, Jake brought out a small device and touched it. Music filled their quarters, something with strings and a gentle rhythm. This is called a guitar, Jake explained, an old Earth instrument. It's lovely, Lyra said. We have music, but ours is mathematical. We calculate the perfect frequencies for emotional response. That sounds very Valexian, Jake said with a slight smile. Humans prefer imperfection. We like it when a note bends or a voice cracks. It feels more real. Lyra listened to the music, trying to understand the appeal of imperfection. Slowly, she began to hear it. The slight variations, the human element that made it alive rather than perfect. Play me something Valexian, Jake said. Lyra pulled up a traditional meditation symphony on her datapad. The pure tones filled the air, precise and calculated. Jake listened intently. It's like mathematics that you can feel, he said. It's actually kind of amazing. They sat together, sharing their cultures through sound. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The next morning, Lyra went to the ship's gym looking for Jake. She found him in the training room, moving through a combat routine. She had seen him exercise before, but always from a distance. Now she watched closely. Jake moved with absolute precision. Every punch, every kick, every defensive motion was practiced and perfect. His body was a weapon, honed by years of training. Despite his friendly demeanor, despite his gentle words, this was what he truly was. A soldier. He noticed her watching and stopped, slightly embarrassed. Sorry, I know it might look aggressive. Why do you train so hard? Lyra asked. The war is over. Jake grabbed his water bottle. A warrior's skills are like a blade. If you don't maintain them, they rust, and you never know when you might need them. Do you expect to need them? I hope I never do, Jake said seriously. But hope isn't a strategy. Being prepared means I can protect the people I care about if something goes wrong. That phrase stuck with Lyra. Protect the people I care about. Was she one of those people now? Later that day, she spoke with Kale Seth, a Valexian science officer who had become her friend aboard the ship. They sat in the mess hall, drinking the hot beverage her people favored. "You seem different, Princess," Kale observed. "Happier." "Jake is a good man," Lyra said. "Better than I expected." "Be careful," Kale warned, his voice low. "There are those among our people who see this peace as betrayal. Chancellor Vexnor has many followers." "The Chancellor is old and bitter," Lyra said. "The treaty is signed." "Treaties can be broken," Kale said darkly, "especially if someone wants them to break." His words troubled Lyra, but she pushed them aside. She didn't want to think about politics today. That evening, Jake surprised her with dinner. He had convinced the ship's cook to prepare a meal that combined human and Valexian ingredients. Some of it was strange, but most of it was good. "This is nice," Lyra said. "Thank you." "I figured we should celebrate," Jake said. "We've been married 6 weeks and we haven't killed each other yet. That's got to count for something." Lyra laughed and realized it was the first time she had truly laughed in months. The sound surprised her. Jake smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You should do that more often." "Do what?" "Laugh. It suits you." They finished their meal in comfortable silence. When it was over, Jake reached across the table and took her hand. Not formally, like during the ceremony. Naturally, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I'm glad it was you," he said quietly. "I'm glad they chose you to marry." Lyra squeezed his hand back. "I'm glad too." It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something real. The alarm woke them in the middle of the ship's night cycle. Lyra sat up, confused and disoriented. Beside her, Jake was already moving, pulling on his uniform with practiced speed. "What's happening?" she asked. "Emergency alert," Jake said, his voice calm but focused. "Get dressed." "Quickly." They rushed to the bridge where Captain Helen Cruz stood at the command station, her face tight with concern. The main screen showed a small transport ship surrounded by 3 larger vessels. "Status report," Helen ordered. "Civilian transport under attack," a human officer reported. "They're sending a distress signal. It's a medical ship, Captain. They have wounded from both sides aboard." "Who's attacking them?" Helen asked. 2 signatures match Valexian military vessels," another officer said. "But they're not responding to our hails. The 3rd ship is human design, but it's not broadcasting any identification codes." Lyra felt her blood run cold. Rogue ships from both sides attacking together. This wasn't random. "It's a trap," Jake said quietly, stepping up beside the captain. "They're using the medical ship as bait." "I agree," Helen said, "but we can't just leave those people to die." "No, we can't," Jake confirmed. Helen turned to her crew. "Battle stations. All hands prepare for combat. Helm, set course to intercept. Maximum speed." The Concordia lurched forward, its engines pushing to full power. Around them, the crew moved with efficient urgency, humans and Valexians working together, just as the peace treaty intended. "Princess, you should go to the secure shelter," Helen said to Lyra. "No," Lyra said firmly. "I stay here. If this is an attack on the peace, I need to witness it." Helen looked at Jake, who nodded slightly. "Let her stay. She's tougher than she looks." As they approached the battle zone, more ships appeared on the sensors. 6 total, 3 from each side. All of them opened fire on the Concordia the moment it entered range. The ship shook as weapons fire struck the shields. Lights flickered. Somewhere below, someone screamed. "Return fire!" Helen ordered. "Defensive pattern Omega, protect the medical ship." The battle erupted around them. Lyra watched the tactical display, trying to make sense of the chaos. Ships wheeled and fired. Explosions bloomed in the darkness, and people were dying. People who wanted the peace to fail. A human officer fell from his station, struck by a piece of shrapnel when a console exploded. Jake moved without thinking, pulling the man to safety and taking his place at the weapons control. "Captain, their flagship is moving to ram the medical transport," a Valexian officer called out. "We can't intercept in time." Helen's jaw tightened. "All power to forward shields. We'll take the hit ourselves." "That'll leave us exposed," Jake said. "I know." The Concordia moved between the medical ship and the attacking vessel. The impact was tremendous. The entire ship groaned, metal shrieking. More consoles exploded. The lights went out, replaced by emergency red lighting. "Shield generators are failing," someone reported. "Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. "Seal those sections," Helen ordered. "Route auxiliary power to weapons." But they were losing. The enemy ships were smaller but faster, and they worked together with deadly coordination. It was clear they had planned this attack carefully. Jake stared at the tactical display, his expression intense. "Captain, request permission to lead a boarding party." "Boarding?" Helen looked at him. "Jake, that's suicide." "Their flagship, the Valexian dreadnought. If we can disable it from the inside, the others will fall back. It's our only chance." Helen hesitated. Lyra could see the calculation in her eyes. The risk versus the necessity. "Do it," Helen finally said. "Take whoever volunteers." Jake turned to leave the bridge, but Lyra grabbed his arm. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," Jake said. "It's too dangerous." "It's my people's ship," Lyra said. "I can help. I know the layout. I know the systems." "Lyra, you need me," she insisted. "And I will not hide while others fight for our peace." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say when I say it. Understand?" "I understand." They ran to the armory. Jake moved through it like he had been there 1,000 times, grabbing weapons and combat gear. He handed Lyra a small pistol and a protective vest. "Ever fired one of these?" he asked. "No." "Point and squeeze. That's all you need to know. But try not to use it unless you have to." 6 other people joined them, 3 humans and 3 Valexians, all volunteers. Among them was Sergeant Amy Rodriguez, a human Marine with sharp eyes and scarred hands. "Been a while since we did this, Lieutenant," Amy said to Jake. "Too long," Jake replied. "Let's hope we remember how." They climbed into a small boarding craft attached to the side of the ship. It was cramped and smelled like oil and fear. Jake took the pilot's seat. "Everyone strapped in?" he called back. Lyra tightened her harness, her heart's pounding. This was insane. She was a scholar, a diplomat. She had never been in combat. The craft launched from the Concordia with a violent lurch. Through the small window, Lyra could see the battle raging around them. Ships fired, twisted, exploded. It was beautiful and terrible. "Incoming fire," someone called out. Jake jerked the craft to the side, avoiding a stream of energy weapons. He flew through the battle like he was dancing, every move precise and confident. The man who shared poetry with her was gone. In his place was a warrior. They approached the enemy flagship from below, using the larger ship's bulk to shield them from sensors. Jake brought them in fast, slamming the boarding craft into the hangar bay door with a shriek of tearing metal. "Breach successful," Amy reported. "Cutting through now." The hangar door gave way, and they piled out into chaos. Valexian soldiers were already rushing toward them. Weapons raised. "Move!" Jake shouted. What happened next would stay with Lyra for the rest of her life. She saw Jake transform before her eyes. The gentle man who held her hand and shared music became something else entirely. He moved through the enemy with brutal efficiency, his weapon firing in short controlled bursts, his body always in motion. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't savage. But he was absolutely, terrifyingly effective. The boarding team fought their way deeper into the ship. Lyra stayed close to Jake, trying not to be a burden. Around her, humans and Valexians fought side by side, protecting each other, dying for each other. This was what peace cost: blood and sacrifice. They reached a junction and Jake held up his hand, signaling a stop. "The reactor control is 2 levels down," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Amy, take half the team and secure our exit route, the rest of you with me." Lyra followed Jake down a corridor, her legs shaking. Ahead, she could hear weapons fire and shouting. The ship shook from explosions. Jake paused at a doorway, checking something on a small device. Then he looked back at her. "Last chance to turn back," he said softly. Lyra shook her head. "We go together." Jake's expression softened for just a moment. "Together," he agreed. They entered the reactor level, and Lyra's heart sank. Standing in the center of the chamber was War Master Thex-Cal, the most feared warrior in the Valexian military. Around him stood a dozen soldiers. "So," Thex-Cal rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "The traitor princess brings her pet human to die. How fitting." Jake stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the War Master. "Let us disable the reactor and leave. Nobody else has to die today." Thex-Cal laughed, a cold and terrible sound. "Everyone dies today, human, starting with you." The reactor chamber was massive, filled with pulsing energy conduits and the deep hum of power generators. War Master Thex-Cal stood like a statue at its center, easily twice as large as any human. His body was covered in combat implants, metal fused with flesh, making him more machine than living being. Jake didn't move. He stood perfectly still, assessing. Lyra had seen him fight in the hangar, quick and efficient. But this was different. This was a predator recognizing another predator. "Get the others to the reactor controls," Jake said quietly to his team. "I'll handle this." "Jake, he'll kill you," one of the human soldiers said. "Maybe," Jake replied, "but not before you complete the mission. Go. Now." The team moved, spreading around the edges of the chamber. Thex-Cal's soldiers moved to intercept, but the War Master raised his hand. "Let them go," he commanded. "I want to kill the human myself. I want to show the galaxy what happens to those who betray their nature." "I haven't betrayed anything," Jake said calmly. "I'm fighting for peace." "Peace?" Thex-Cal laughed. "Humans don't want peace. You want war. It's in your blood, your nature. You're predators pretending to be civilized." "You're wrong," Jake said. "But I don't expect you to understand." Thex-Cal charged. Lyra had never seen anything move so fast. The War Master crossed the distance between them in seconds. His massive fist aimed at Jake's head. It should have been impossible to avoid. Jake moved like water. He slipped under the punch, rolling to the side as Thex-Cal's fist smashed into the floor where he had been standing. Metal crumpled under the impact. Jake came up firing his weapon at point-blank range. The shots bounced off Thex-Cal's armor. "Pathetic," the War Master snarled, swinging his other arm. Jake ducked, weaved, stayed in constant motion. He was faster, but Thex-Cal was stronger. One hit would end the fight. Lyra watched in horror as her husband danced with death, each movement calculated to keep him alive 1 second longer. Around the chamber, the rest of the team fought Thex-Cal's soldiers. Energy blasts filled the air. Someone screamed. Lyra crouched behind a console, her pistol in her shaking hands, useless. Jake grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the floor and swung it at Thex-Cal's knee joint. The War Master stumbled, surprised. Jake pressed the advantage, striking again and again at the same spot, targeting the weakness in the armor. Thex-Cal roared and caught the pipe, ripping it from Jake's hands. He swung it like a club. Jake tried to dodge, but he was a fraction too slow. The pipe caught him in the ribs and sent him flying across the chamber. Jake hit the wall hard and fell. He didn't move. "No!" Lyra screamed. She fired her pistol at Thex-Cal without thinking. The shots went wild, hitting nothing. The War Master turned toward her, his expression amused. "The princess wants to fight?" he said. "How sweet." He took a step toward her. Jake stood up. Blood ran from his mouth. He held his ribs with one hand. but his eyes were clear and focused. He walked back toward Thek's Cal, limping but determined. "I'm not done," Jake said. Something in his voice made Thek's Cal pause. It wasn't anger or fear. It was certainty, the absolute refusal to stop, to give up, to quit. It was the voice of someone who would rather die than fail. They fought again. This time, it was different. Jake wasn't trying to avoid damage anymore. He took hits to deliver hits. He let Thek's Cal's fist strike his shoulder so he could get inside the War Master's guard and drive his elbow into an armor joint. He accepted pain as the price of progress. Lyra watched her husband fight like no one she had ever seen. He bled, he broke, but he kept moving forward. Thek's Cal was stronger, bigger, better armored, but Jake was relentless. Every time he fell, he got back up. Every time Thek's Cal knocked him down, he stood again, and again, and again. "Why won't you die?" Thek's Cal roared, frustrated now. "Because I can't," Jake gasped, blood on his teeth. "Too many people are counting on me. Lyra is counting on me." He launched himself at Thek's Cal one more time. The War Master caught him by the throat and lifted him off the ground, squeezing. Jake's face turned red, then purple. But Jake had both hands free. He jammed his fingers into the gap between Thek's Cal's armor plates at the neck, found the neural interface cables that connected the War Master's body to his cybernetics, and pulled. Thek's Cal screamed. His entire right side went dead, the cybernetic enhancements shutting down. He dropped Jake and staggered backward. Jake fell to his knees, gasping for air. He looked up at the War Master with fierce eyes. "I fight like this so people like Lyra don't have to," he said hoarsely. "That's what you don't understand. Humans aren't violent because we love war. We're violent because we love peace enough to protect it." Thek's Cal reached for him with his remaining good arm, but Jake was faster. He grabbed a fallen weapon and fired once, twice, 3 times at the weakened armor. The shots punched through. The War Master fell. Around the chamber, the fighting stopped. The enemy soldiers saw their leader down and lost their will to fight. They dropped their weapons. "Reactor disabled, Lieutenant," Amy called from the control station. "Mission complete." Jake tried to stand but couldn't. His legs gave out and he collapsed. Lyra ran to him, sliding to her knees beside him. Jake, stay with me." His eyes found hers. Even now, bleeding and broken, he smiled slightly. "Did we win?" "Yes, you fool. We won." Tears ran down her face. "Why did you do that? Why did you keep fighting?" "Had to," Jake whispered. "Had to protect you." The medical team arrived, human and Valexian doctors working together. They stabilized Jake and loaded him onto a stretcher. Lyra held his hand the entire time, refusing to let go. As they carried him to the boarding craft, Jake squeezed her hand weakly. "I'm sorry," he said. "Sorry you had to see me like that." Lyra looked at him, this human who had fought a monster to protect her, who had refused to quit even when his body was broken. "I saw you," she said softly. "I truly saw you, Jake Morrison. And I understand now." She understood what it meant to be human. The capacity for violence was matched by the capacity for sacrifice. They fought not with hatred, but with purpose. They endured not because they were unable to feel pain, but because something mattered more than their own safety. Jake had fought like a god of battle, but he had done it with a mortal heart, driven by love and duty. As the boarding craft launched back toward the Concordia, Lyra looked at Jake's unconscious form. His face was peaceful now, despite the injuries. He had done what he needed to do, and she had learned what she needed to learn. The enemy fleet was retreating. The medical ship was safe. Dozens of people, human and Valexian, were alive because of what Jake and his team had done. But the cost was written in blood and broken bones. Lyra held Jake's hand and made a silent promise. She would make sure everyone understood what had happened here today. She would make sure the peace lasted. She would make sure his sacrifice meant something. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. 3 weeks after the battle, Lyra sat beside Jake's hospital bed on Harmony Prime Station. He was awake now, recovering slowly. His ribs were healing, the bruises were fading, but he was alive. She had barely left his side since they brought him back. "You need to rest," Jake said for the 100th time. "I'm fine. The doctors say I'll be up in a few days." "I'll rest when I'm ready," Lyra replied, not looking up from her data pad. She was reading everything she could find about human military history, human philosophy, human psychology. She was trying to understand what she had witnessed in that reactor chamber. Jake watched her quietly. "What are you looking for?" "Answers," Lyra said. "I saw you fight, Jake. I saw you refuse to quit even when your body was broken. I saw you face something twice your size without fear. I'm trying to understand how." "Training," Jake said simply. "Practice, discipline." "No." Lyra shook her head. "It's more than that. I've been reading about your wars. Your people have a phrase. To the last man, to the last round, to the last second. That's not training. That's something deeper." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "We fight for what we love," he finally said. "That's the secret. A human who's fighting for something they love is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." "But you were ready to die," Lyra said softly. "You kept fighting even when you should have fallen." "Because you were there," Jake said, meeting her eyes. "Because if I fell, you would be in danger. That was unacceptable." Lyra felt something break inside her chest. Not painfully, but like ice melting. "I thought humans were monsters. That's what we were taught. You fight like demons. You never surrender. You're savage and brutal." "And now?" Jake asked. "Now I understand. You fight like demons so your children can live in peace. You're brutal because you're willing to bear that burden yourself rather than pass it to others. You're savage because you love so fiercely that you'll do anything to protect what matters." She reached out and took his hand. "You're not monsters. You're protectors." The door opened and a tall figure entered. Lyra's father, Emperor Calvesh, stood in the doorway. He wore simple robes, not his formal regalia. This was a personal visit, not a political one. Jake tried to sit up, but the Emperor waved him down. "Rest, Lieutenant Morrison. You've earned it." "Your Majesty," Jake said respectfully. The Emperor looked at his daughter, then at the human lying in the hospital bed. "I came to thank you," he said. "You saved my daughter's life." "I just did my duty, sir." "No," the Emperor said firmly. "You did far more than duty. I watched the recordings from the battle. I saw what you did. I saw you fight a war master, one of our most feared warriors, and win." He sat down heavily in a chair. "I didn't understand humans before. I thought you were simply violent. Now I see you are something else. You are warriors by necessity, not by nature." "We dream of peace, Your Majesty," Jake said quietly. "Every human soldier dreams of the day their skills become obsolete. We fight so our children won't have to." The Emperor was silent, considering those words. "The Valexian way is different. We see peace as the absence of conflict, but you see peace as something worth fighting for, worth dying for." "Yes, sir," Jake said. "That's exactly it." "Then perhaps we have much to learn from each other." The Emperor stood. "The Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss the attack. There are those who want to use it as an excuse to restart the war. But I will argue for the opposite. You and my daughter, fighting side by side, dying for each other. That is the future I want to build." After the Emperor left, Lyra and Jake sat in comfortable silence. The afternoon light from the station's windows painted the room in soft colors. "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked suddenly. Being chosen for this marriage? Jake looked at her with surprise. No, never. Do you? No, Lyra said, but it was supposed to be a political arrangement just for show. Things change, Jake said softly. People change. We changed. Lyra nodded. When I saw you fighting Thexcal, I was terrified. Not just afraid you would die, but afraid of what it would mean if you did. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being an arrangement. For me, too, Jake admitted. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe when we shared music. Maybe when you laughed for the first time. But at some point, you stopped being the princess I married for peace. You became Lyra, the woman I care about. Just care about? Lyra asked, a slight smile on her face. Jake smiled back. I'm wounded. Don't make me say embarrassing things. Lyra leaned forward and kissed him gently. It was their first real kiss, not the formal one from the wedding ceremony. This one was real. When she pulled back, Jake's eyes were bright. I should get injured more often. Don't you dare, Lyra said, but she was smiling. The next day, Jake was cleared to attend the council meeting. He insisted on going despite the doctor's protests. Lyra went with him, their hands clasped together. The council chamber was full. Representatives from both civilizations filled the seats. Chancellor Vex Nor was there, his face stern. But so were others who supported the peace. Ambassador Nicole Wright stood to speak first. The attack on the Concordia was meant to destroy the peace. Instead, it proved why peace is necessary. Humans and Valexians fought together. They bled together. They saved each other. That is the future we should build. Chancellor Vex Nor rose angrily. It also proved that both our peoples have traitors. It showed that this peace is fragile and foolish. It showed that peace is worth fighting for, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Captain Helen Cruz stood at the back of the chamber. Beside her were the survivors of the boarding team, humans and Valexians together. We fought side by side, Helen continued. We trusted each other with our lives, and we won. Not because we're human or Valexian, but because we worked together. One by one, others stood to speak. Doctors who had treated wounded from both sides, engineers who had repaired the damage together, ordinary people who had seen the cost of war and the hope of peace. When it came time to vote, the result was overwhelming. The peace treaty was reaffirmed. More than that, it was expanded. Exchange programs were established, joint training exercises, shared technology development. The peace would continue. After the vote, Jake and Lyra stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The same place where they had stood on their wedding day, awkward strangers bound by duty. We should get married again, Jake said suddenly. Lyra looked at him in confusion. We're already married. I mean really married, Jake said. Not for politics, not for peace, just because we want to. Lyra smiled. Are you proposing to me, Lieutenant Morrison? I am. Princess Lyra Velsheri. Will you marry me? For real this time? Yes, Lyra said without hesitation. Yes, I will. They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead. Two people from different worlds, brought together by war and choice, a princess and a soldier, a scholar and a warrior. 6 months later, they stood together again for a second wedding ceremony. This time, it wasn't in a cold council chamber. It was on Earth, in a simple garden with friends and family watching. Lyra wore blue and white, colors of both their worlds. Jake wore his dress uniform, looking uncomfortable, but happy. When it came time for the vows, Lyra spoke first. I promise to stand with you, to learn from you, and to build a future where your strength is used to protect, not to destroy. Jake's turn came. I promise to be worthy of your trust, to fight for our peace, and to make sure our children never know the war we survived. They kissed, and this time the applause was genuine and warm. At the reception, humans and Valexians mingled freely. Music from both cultures filled the air. Children of both species played together, unconcerned with old hatreds. Ambassador Nicole approached Lyra with a smile. "You two have become the symbol of this peace. How does that feel?" "Heavy," Lyra admitted. "But good. If our marriage can show others that peace is possible, then it's worth it." "It's more than just possible," Nicole said. "You're making it real." As the evening wore on, Jake and Lyra found themselves alone for a moment, standing under Earth's moon. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked. "I'm thinking about the first time we met," Lyra said. "I thought you were ordinary, unremarkable." "Thanks," Jake said with a laugh. "But I was wrong," Lyra continued. "You're extraordinary, you and all your people. You carry such capacity for violence, but you temper it with mercy. You fight like gods when necessary, but you dream of peace." "That's just being human," Jake said. "No," Lyra said firmly. "That's being the best kind of human. The kind who fights not because they love war, but because they love peace so much they'll die to protect it." She looked up at him, this man who had married her for duty and stayed for love. "I married a human for peace, but I fell in love with a warrior who showed me what humanity truly means." Jake pulled her close. "And I married a princess for politics, but I fell in love with a woman who taught me that peace is worth any sacrifice." They stood together under the stars, two souls bound by choice and love. The war was over. The peace was holding. And the future they were building together was bright with hope. In the distance, children laughed, both human and Valexian, playing together without fear or hatred. That sound, more than any treaty or ceremony, was the promise of tomorrow. A tomorrow where Jake's skills as a warrior would never again be needed. A tomorrow where Lyra's work as a bridge between worlds would create lasting friendship. A tomorrow built on understanding, sacrifice, and love. The peace had been won. Now they would keep it together.